All right, strap in, everyone, because we're diving deep today. We got tons of requests to take a closer look at the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next Percent 3 Ekiden running shoes. And let me tell you, we did not hold back. We dug through
Oh,
reviews,
yeah.
comparisons, tech specs, you name it. We have went down a rabbit hole of Japanese running history, all to figure out what makes these shoes so special.
I think it's safe to say we went full-on deep dive mode for this one.
Full on is an understatement.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the more we dug, the more we realized these aren't just your average running shoes. There's a whole story here, some serious science, and maybe even a little controversy.
Yeah, for sure.
Luckily, we've got an expert here to help us make sense of it all. So first things first, who are these shoes actually made for? Because the sources are pretty clear. The Alphafly 3 Ekiden is not for your casual weekend jogger.
Definitely not. These are top-tier performance shoes. We're talking elite athletes, marathon runners, folks who are really trying to shave seconds off their time, you know?
Yeah, serious runners. The sources even mention a weight limit, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah, it makes sense, though.
If you're over 75 kilograms, these probably aren't the shoes for you. Why is that so important, especially at that level of running?
It's all about efficiency, right? When you're running that far, that fast, every little bit of energy matters. And the Alphafly 3 is engineered to maximize that efficiency. But for it to work properly, it needs to be in sync with the runner's body.
Okay, so these shoes are definitely not for everyone. But that just makes them even more intriguing, right? What is it about them that makes them such a game changer for those elite runners?
Yeah.
Let's get into the tech. We kept seeing Air Zoom units, ZoomX foam, a carbon fiber plate.
And don't forget the Atom Knit upper.
Right, the Atom Knit upper.
Yeah.
It's like they took everything in the lab and threw it at this shoe.
Yeah.
So can you break it down for us? How do all these things work together?
Well, think of it this way. Each of these elements plays a role in giving the shoe that almost spring-like feel. The ZoomX foam, for instance, is super light and bouncy, giving you that amazing energy return with every stride. Then you've got the carbon fiber plate, almost like a mini diving board built into the sole.
Wait, really? Like an actual diving board?
Yeah, basically. It stiffens the shoe and helps propel you forward, making your stride more efficient. But honestly, the part that blew my mind was the air zoom units. And I mean, we're not talking about just a simple air bubble here.
Right. There's got to be more to it than that.
Oh, way more. These units are packed with thousands, like literally thousands of tiny little fibers that compress and expand with every single movement. They're working constantly to provide support and responsiveness.
So it's not just cushioning, it's like active support that's adapting to your foot in real time.
Yeah, pretty much. It's that dynamic element that makes it so unique. And that brings us to the Ekiden part of the name. You familiar with Ekiden races?
I have to admit I had to do a little research.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, it's that Japanese relay race, super intense, lots of strategy and teamwork involved.
Mm-hmm.
So why would Nike release a special edition for that specific type of race?
That's where it gets interesting. Some people speculate they're targeting relay teams directly, but maybe it's just a nod to the spirit of Ekiden itself. Pushing limits, working together, that whole vibe.
It's a mystery.
Yeah.
Well, I guess some mysteries are best left unsolved. For now, at least.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the tech, the mysterious name, but how does this shoe stack up against the competition? Our research mentioned a few other Nike models, the Vaporfly Next 3 being one of them. What's the main difference between that one and the Alphafly?
Well, it seems like the Vaporfly is marketed as more of a versatile option. It's designed to perform well across various distances, from your 5K to a full marathon.
Ah, okay.
The Alphafly, on the other hand, is more specialized, really shining in those longer, more demanding races.
So the Vaporfly could be a good choice for someone who wants that high-tech edge, but isn't necessarily aiming for a full marathon.
Exactly, which I think highlights that even within a brand like Nike, there's a recognition that different runners have different needs.
Makes sense. And then there were some other shoes in the mix, too, like the Streakfly, which seems geared toward those regular runs, and the Infinity RN4 Gore-Tex for all weather conditions.
Right.
It's kind of wild to see how specialized running shoes have become.
It's like any piece of athletic equipment, really. The key is finding the right tool for the job, something that works with your body and helps you reach your goals.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
But when it comes to those serious marathoners, those elite runners pushing for peak performance, it's clear Nike sees the Alphafly 3 as their top-tier option.
Yeah.
And speaking of top tier, one of the sources we dug into was the actual iRun product page, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't just your average product description. This iRun website is a whole thing. It's like a hub for runners of all levels.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that. They've got everything. And the reviews were really interesting. Some folks were talking about how the Alphafly 3 actually improved their running economy.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. But the thing that caught my eye was the mention of Kelvin Kiptum, the marathon world record holder.
Oh,
He was wearing the Alphafly 3s when he broke the record. Talk about real-world validation.
that's got to be a major selling point. Okay, so we've got this shoe, designed for speed, packed with tech, even endorsed by a world record holder. That's impressive.
It definitely is. But it also raises some questions, about the future of running and the role technology plays in pushing the boundaries of human performance.
Ooh, good point. And speaking of pushing boundaries, what about the Alphafly 3 itself? What sets it apart from the previous model, the Alphafly 2? Did our sources mention any major upgrades?
Oh, yeah, definitely. For starters, the Alphafly 3 is even lighter and more streamlined than its predecessor.
Wider. Wow.
They also widened the carbon plate for better stability.
Okay, so we're talking even lighter, even more efficient, even more stable. I'm sensing a theme here.
And maybe the biggest change of all is the full-length foam midsole. So you get a smoother transition from heel to toe, better shock absorption, improved lateral support, the whole 9 yards.
They basically took everything they learned from the Alphafly 2 and said, let's crank it up a notch.
Exactly.
But lighter doesn't always mean better, right? How do these changes actually affect the shoe's performance, and what are the trade-offs?
That's a great question, isn't it? I mean, lighter can definitely mean faster, but you don't want to sacrifice things like stability or durability.
Yeah, you don't want the shoe falling apart halfway through a marathon, that's for sure.
Right. But from all the reviews and the analysis we dug up, it seems like Nike actually pulled it off. They managed to strike a balance.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that wider carbon plate and the full-length foam midsole, those actually contribute to both stability and a smoother ride, which is pretty impressive.
So they didn't just like shave off weight for the sake of it. They really thought about how to maintain, maybe even improve performance.
Exactly. And that's what makes this shoe so interesting. It's not just about throwing in a bunch of fancy tech. It's about making sure that tech actually translates into real-world results for those elite runners.
Kind of like Formula One racing. You could have the most powerful engine in the world, but if the car doesn't handle well, you're not going to win any races.
That's a perfect analogy. And speaking of winning, remember we were talking about Kelvin Kiptum breaking that marathon world record in the Alphafly 3? Well, that actually brings up an interesting point that popped up a few times in the sources. The whole debate about these super shoes and whether they're giving runners an unfair advantage.
Oh yeah, I've heard some people say that, like it's not a level playing field anymore.
It's a big discussion in the running community. Some people argue these shoes are actually making the sport more accessible.
How so?
Well, because they kind of help compensate for those who might not have, the best natural biomechanics. But then others say it's taking away from the purity of the sport. Like it's turning into more of a tech race than a test of human endurance.
It's like that argument in cycling about aerodynamic bikes and suits. It's that question of where's the line between technology enhancing performance versus fundamentally changing the sport itself?
Right. And it's a tough one. No easy answers. But it definitely adds another layer to the whole Alphafly 3 conversation. Like this isn't just a piece of footwear. It's become a symbol of this larger debate about technology and athletic achievement.
It's pretty deep when you think about it.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back down to earth for a sec. We've been talking about elite athletes, tech, controversy. But what about the rest of us? What can someone like me, who enjoys a good jog, but isn't training for a marathon, take away from all this?
That's a really good point. And I think the biggest takeaway is finding the right shoe for your individual needs and goals. Because as cool as the Alphafly 3 is, it's definitely not the right shoe for everyone.
You're saying all that tech, all that innovation might not actually benefit someone who's not running at that elite level.
Right. It might even be a disadvantage, to be honest. If you're not used to a shoe that's that stiff and responsive, it can actually mess with your gait and could lead to injuries.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation.
Definitely not. It's kind of like trying to learn to drive in a race car. Not the best place to start.
Good point. So what are some things people should keep in mind when choosing a running shoe, especially if they're not aiming for a spot on the marathon podium?
Well, I'd say the first thing is comfort. You want a shoe that feels good on your foot and supports your natural movement. And then think about the kind of running you'll be doing. Pavement, trails, treadmill.
And don't forget your own biomechanics. Foot type, arch, pronation, all that stuff.
Exactly. And honestly, a good running store can be a huge help with that. They can analyze your gait, give you personalized recommendations, even let you try out different shoes.
It's like having a personal shoe shopper. I love it.
It is. And speaking of shoe shopping, remember we mentioned all those customer reviews on the iRun website? Well, that actually brings up another important point. Do your research.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Read reviews from other runners, compare different models. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Don't be shy. It's your feet, your comfort, and ultimately your performance that are at stake.
Exactly. It's worth taking the time to make sure you're investing in the right shoe for you. And sometimes that might mean choosing a shoe that's, maybe less flashy, less high-tech, but ultimately a better fit for your needs.
Well said. So even though our deep dive has been all about the Alphafly 3, it sounds like the real lesson here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to running shoes.
Absolutely. It's about finding that synergy between your body, your goals, and your gear. And speaking of which, remember we were talking about how much lighter and more streamlined the Alphafly 3 is compared to its predecessor?
Yeah, the design changes.
Well, we talked about how those changes were meant to boost performance, but it's also kind of cool to think about them in the context of, like, the evolution of running shoe design in general?
I don't think I've ever thought about it that way before.
Yeah, like if you look back at running shoes from even a few decades ago, they were clunky, heavy, and mostly focused on just cushioning. And now we're seeing this shift towards shoes that are lighter, more responsive, and designed to actually work with the runner's natural movement.
It's like running shoes went on a diet.
Kinda, yeah. And I think it shows a deeper understanding of biomechanics and how to optimize performance. It's not just about protecting the foot anymore. It's about maximizing its capabilities.
That's a great point. And, so much of the focus with the Alphafly 3 has been on the physical benefits, like the speed, the efficiency, the stability. But what about the mental side of things? Do you think a shoe like this can actually have an impact on a runner's psychology?
That's a great question, and one that I don't think gets talked about enough. Like, imagine you're standing at the starting line of a marathon, right? And you're wearing the same shoe that helped someone break a world record.
Yeah.
I gotta imagine that's a huge confidence boost.
Like wearing a superhero cape almost.
Exactly. It could help you tap into that mindset of focus and determination, that belief in your own ability to achieve something amazing.
It's like the placebo effect.
Yeah.
But for running shoes.
Exactly. And that mental edge can be just as important as the physical advantages, especially when you're pushing yourself to the limit.
It's not just about the shoe. It's about how the shoe makes you feel. I like that.
It is. And I think it's something to remember whenever you're choosing any piece of athletic gear, really. It's not just about the features and specs. It's about how that gear empowers you to perform at your best.
That's a great way to put it. So it sounds like the Alphafly 3 is really for that runner who understands the connection between the physical and the mental, someone who's driven to push their limits and who wants to be on the cutting edge of running technology.
For sure. It's for the runner who sees a shoe as more than just a shoe. It's like a tool, a partner in their journey. It's a symbol of their aspirations.
Well said.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. We're not just talking about a product. We're talking about the human spirit, the desire to achieve great things, and what happens when we combine human potential with, incredible technology.
Couldn't agree more. And something else that stood out to me in our research was all the attention to detail in the Alphafly 3's construction. Like, they use this atom knit upper material, which is supposed to be crazy breathable and lightweight.
Right. I was reading about that.
Yeah. And I think it highlights another important trend in running shoe design: the emphasis on both breathability and comfort.
Makes sense. You want your feet to be happy while you're out there running.
Absolutely. Nobody wants sweaty, blistered feet ruining their marathon.
For real. So are you saying it's not just about slapping a carbon fiber plate on a shoe and calling it a day?
Yeah.
You really have to think about every element and how it contributes to the whole experience.
That's exactly it. It's about creating a design that supports the runner in every way possible. Comfort, performance, the whole package.
It's actually pretty amazing to think about how much thought and engineering goes into something we put on our feet.
I know, right? It really speaks to the dedication and passion of the people who design and create these shoes. It's like they're helping athletes achieve their dreams.
That's beautiful. Okay, we've covered a lot here. The tech, the debate, the mental game, even the evolution of running shoe design. But there's one big question I still have. Is the Alphafly 3 actually worth the hype?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, there's no one right answer. It really depends on you, on your individual needs, your goals, and let's be real, your budget.
Yeah, because these aren't exactly budget-friendly shoes.
Nope, not really. But if you're a serious runner, someone who's dedicated to pushing their limits and who's looking for that extra edge,
Yeah.
then yeah, the Alphafly 3 could be a really worthwhile investment.
But for someone like me who's more of a casual runner, it's probably not necessary.
Probably not. There are so many other great running shoes out there that are more affordable, and that'll be a much better fit for, everyday running.
So the key takeaway here is do your research, figure out what you need, and don't just get caught up in all the hype.
Exactly. It's about finding the shoe that helps you run your best, no matter what your goals are, whether you're chasing a world record or just enjoying a nice jog in the park.
Well said. And speaking of enjoying the journey, remember we were talking about how iRun is more than just a website? Like they have a whole community aspect going on.
Yeah, it's awesome. They've got forums, training plans, articles. They even organize events.
It's like a one-stop shop for everything running related.
Totally. And I think it just goes to show that running is more than just a sport. It's a whole community. It's a lifestyle.
I love that. And a good shoe can be like your companion on that journey.
It's the thing that connects you to the ground, that propels you forward, that lets you experience the joy and freedom of running.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired now. We've covered so much about the Alphafly 3. I think we've pretty much hit everything.
We've really gone from the science to the soul of this shoe.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
We talked about the tech, the controversy, those personal stories, and the bigger picture of what it means to be a runner in this day and age.
It's been a deep dive in every sense of the word.
Absolutely. But, as much as we've learned, there's always more to discover, right?
Always. That's the beauty of knowledge. It never really ends.
True. Well, on that note, I think this wraps up part 2 of our deep dive into the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next 3 Ekiden.
It does.
Hope you've enjoyed the ride so far. We'll be back in just a bit with part 3, where we'll wrap things up and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder. All right, welcome back to the final stretch of our deep dive. It's time to wrap up our exploration of the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next 3 Ekiden.
I know, right? I feel like we've run a marathon of information ourselves.
We kind of have, but it's been so fascinating to really dig deep into this shoe and everything it represents.
I agree.
We've talked about how it's designed for those elite athletes, the ones pushing the boundaries of human performance.
Those runners who are looking for any advantage they can get.
Exactly. But what about everyone else? What if you're not training for a marathon? What if you're just starting out, or maybe you're happy with a casual jog a few times a week?
Well, I think that's where it becomes even more important to remember that not every shoe is for every runner.
You're saying that even with all the amazing tech in the Alphafly 3,
Even with all that, yeah.
it might not actually be the best choice for everyone.
Exactly. In fact, for someone who's not used to that level of stiffness and responsiveness, it could even be a bit of a drawback.
Right, like we said before, you don't want to jump into a race car when you're just learning to drive.
Exactly. So I think for those listeners who maybe aren't elite marathoners, the biggest takeaway here is to focus on the fundamentals.
The fundamentals of running shoes.
Yeah. Comfort, support, and finding the right fit for your foot.
Those are the non-negotiables no matter what kind of runner you are.
Exactly. Then you can start thinking about other factors like the type of running you're doing, whether it's mostly on pavement, trails, or a treadmill.
Of course, you've got to factor in your own biomechanics like your foot type, arch, and pronation.
Absolutely. That stuff can make a huge difference.
It really can. And honestly, if you're not sure where to start, a good running store can be a lifesaver.
Oh, for sure. They can take a look at your gait, give you some personalized advice, and even let you try out a few different shoes before you commit.
It's like having a personal stylist for your feet.
Huh, I like that. And speaking of personalized, something that really struck me when we were going through the research was how much emphasis there was on the importance of training and technique.
Yeah, even with a shoe as advanced as the Alphafly 3.
Right. Even with all that, it's not going to magically transform you into an Olympic athlete overnight.
There's no substitute for hard work and dedication.
Exactly. It still takes effort and commitment to reach your full potential as a runner. The shoe can definitely help. It can enhance your performance, but it's not a replacement for good old-fashioned training.
So it's like a reminder that technology can be a powerful tool, but it's ultimately up to the individual to use it effectively.
That's a great way to put it, and I think that's a really good point to end on. The Alphafly 3 is a pretty amazing example of how far we've come in terms of athletic footwear, and it shows how technology is pushing the boundaries of what's possible in sports.
It definitely does.
But at the end of the day, it's the human element that really matters. The passion, the drive, the dedication. those are the things that ultimately make the difference.
I couldn't agree more. So whether you're an elite marathoner or someone who's just starting out, remember to find the joy in running, listen to your body, and never stop exploring what you're capable of achieving.
Well said.
All right, everyone, that wraps up our deep dive into the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next Percent 3 Ekiden. We hope you've enjoyed the journey.
We've had a blast exploring this topic with you.
We sure have. And until next time, keep on running, keep on learning, and keep on pushing those limits. You never know what amazing things you might discover.